Hey everybody, hope you're all doing well. My name is Steven and this is the Storytime channel. Today we have some malicious compliance stories and our first story of the day is by BushcraftHatchet. Challenge anyone? Okay. This is my dad's story of the small time that he was an airman in the US Air Force, probably back in the early 1950s. He worked guard at an airbase up north with cold winters. He was positioned as a night guard that was guarding airplanes out next to the runway. Every night, with his jacket wrapped tightly around him, he got up and out to the runway. He patrolled up and down the runway down the long line of airplanes. Armed only with a flashlight and a .45 caliber handgun, he was to challenge any who he came across. Like anyone would actually want to be out in the cold weather. One night his sergeant, who did not like my dad and kept him on the patrol shift, came out to check on him. My dad saw the sergeant approaching and could tell who it was in the bright moonlight. When the sergeant rounded the airplane, Dad called, "I'm here, Sergeant." What followed was a verbal lashing from the sergeant, of course getting more and more dramatic every time my dad told the story. The sergeant basically gave orders that my father was to challenge anyone who was out at the airplanes with a sharp, "Halt! Who goes there?" command. The sergeant warned that if my dad did not challenge him that exact way, that the next time he would be in trouble and would have even worse detail. My dad didn't like the idea of anything worse than walking a guard duty of planes in the middle of freezing weather, so he meant to do just that. Now, walking around all night meant a lot of boredom, and all he had to keep his mind occupied was a flashlight and a .45 caliber handgun. He started entertaining himself by learning to flip the flashlight in the air and catch it, flip it into his pocket, and basically several tricks with it. Next, he started practicing a quick draw with the .45, where in a split second he could draw the .45 halfway from the holster, turn it sideways, cock the slide, and get it out of the holster. Oh, to hear him tell it. He was like unto the Long Ranger with the speed he improved to after about 2 weeks of practice. It wasn't too long later that he heard that sergeant out on the runway again, coming toward my dad. Cue malicious compliance. Now my dad was not really a sneaky kind of man, but he made his way as quietly down the line of airplanes, closer and closer to the sergeant. He has made up in his mind what he was going to do. As soon as he got near the sergeant, he jumped out from behind the plane, his flashlight illuminating the person, and his immediately chambered .45 flashed out into his hand with a booming, "Halt! Who goes there?" But what the flashlight illuminated was not a slightly scared sergeant, but a lieutenant who was up and out early to check out his plane for an early morning mission, who, upon seeing the tenacity of the guard before him and the .45 trained on him, immediately answered up, Whoa, Lieutenant Smith! I'm just checking out my bird, son. I got an early mission. Do you want to see the orders?" My dad immediately holstered the weapon and flipped his flashlight into his pocket and saluted. "Sorry, sir, but my orders are to challenge anyone who is found out here next to the planes at night." The lieutenant smiled and answered back, "Shoot no, son. Fine job. What is your name, airman? I would like to tell your sergeant he has a hell of a guard out here." After the good word got back to the sergeant, he had a little pity on my dad and let him swap out nights on the runway with 2 other guards, so he didn't have to be out there every night. Let's say the weather was actually absolutely pleasant. If you had this job, how long would you be able to stand just pacing around up and down the airplanes, just kind of watching around before you just completely lose your mind? It sounds like the most boring job in the world. I have absolute kudos sent out to this man, but I would have gone insane very quickly. Let me know how long you think it would take you in the comments down below. Our next story is by Nage2020, Drive a Forklift Through It. I was working as a warehouse manager for a pharmaceutical/cosmetic company. Our premises was part of a large industrial complex that had been walled off into 3 smaller buildings that had 3 different businesses occupying them. My office was a freestanding building inside the warehouse. It was about the size of a shipping container. My company was in the process of redeveloping the insides of the warehouse. As a result, my office had to go. My immediate boss was the operations manager, and he came to me one morning and told me to demolish my office by the end of the day. Now, we had tools, but only hammers and spanners, etc. Nothing really suited for the task at hand. When I asked how he expected me to do it, he said, Just drive a forklift through it." To this day, I am not sure if he was joking or being sarcastic or actually meant it, but it had been said and in front of 4 witnesses. Like most grown men with the inner workings of a 5-year-old, I love chaos and destruction, so I chose to take advantage of the situation. I would love to say I rammed the office at full speed like the Dukes of Hazzard on meth, but I figured that may be too extreme. What I did was push the walls in slowly before lifting off the roof panels. All was going well. I got called away to another part of the warehouse and another worker decided to take up where I left off. He started lifting a roof panel off when there was a loud noise, a cross between a bang and popping cork. This is the point where we realized that one of the pipes for the fire sprinkler system ran through the office roof and it had been completely ripped out. The pressure in the system caused an initial spray of water before a torrent of water spewed forth at roof height. The water had been in the pipes for at least 20 years and combined with the dirt in the rafters, it was like it was raining squid ink. It covered the finished goods, the raw materials, the workers, and the equipment. The production line was immediately shut down and everyone was panicking. We had a plumber on site who was able to stop the flow. It had been flowing for about 5 minutes when we heard the sirens. The fire system had automatically alerted the fire department when the water pressure dropped. Due to the nature of our business, we had on site up to 30,000 liters of pure alcohol and ethanol. So when the firemen came, they came prepared for the worst. 3 trucks and about 20 firemen. The firemen go to turn the water off, but the valves are in one of the other warehouses. One was occupied by a heating company, the other by a Christian food drive. The heating company had knocked off early and the Christian place was occupied sporadically. Firemen have to break down the doors of these businesses until they find and shut off the water. Firemen aren't happy with the situation, and here in Australia, if you are responsible for a false alarm, you get fined potentially thousands of dollars for wasting their time. The damage bill was going to be massive in terms of fines, ruined stock, and materials and lost time. It all happened so fast, not much had been said, but once the situation was under control, the operations manager was looking for answers. He approached me asking what the heck I had done. At this point, I informed him that it was not me as I was elsewhere at the time, and that for the record, he had instructed me to drive a forklift through the building. He turned pale as the reality of his own culpability sank in. End result was that the worker operating the fork at the time was deemed responsible. I think they needed an official scapegoat for insurance claim, but no official record was made and no punishment handed out. It was all swept under the table and never mentioned again. All things considered, I'm really shocked that all got swept under the table, considering they needed some kind of scapegoat and it was probably pretty easy to just dump it all on the coworker that actually ripped the pipes out. I'm just actually shocked they didn't give them the boot and just chalk it up to them being a scapegoat. This next story is by sagerideout, Goodwill Hunters. I work at one of the more popular chain thrift stores, processing and putting out electrical. Usually we bring product out twice a day. The first time, we usually bring our cart out, go to lunch, and then put everything on the shelves when we get back. This helps get rid of at least 20% of the work we have to do. Mind you, we have signs that state customers aren't supposed to even be within 6 feet of the cart for safety purposes. We sometimes have to Tetris crap to get everything we processed on there, and it can be a bit sketchy. And it also makes our job more difficult putting product out if they actively look at our cart, which is why we bring it out early. My cart's usually well organized and free of hazards, and they usually help, so why not let people shop if they're being respectful? Well, we have people who come to the store at those times specifically to poach good items to resell them. We have a lot of respectful regulars whom I actually have built bonds with, but some of the non-consistent regulars are a nightmare. Examples: when you try to roll the rack onto the floor, they swarm you and start grabbing items, making it impossible to move, calling out what items they want and fighting with others. One guy even jumped on the rack to get something before someone else. Now, I'm not shy or timid, but I am pretty reserved and usually have a carefree attitude, but this crap was annoying. So I started just telling them to let me park before they go at it. 2 out of 10. Had my coworker who used to do security come out with me where he told everyone to back off while I rolled the cart. 9 out of 10, but he wasn't always available and it rightfully made me look like a witch. So there I was. I needed to be self-dependent. It only happened probably about half the time, and I didn't want to lose out on making my job easier, but was also just fed up. Then I had it. I roll my cart out like normal. If it's a good day, I leave my cart out and go to lunch. If it's not, well, they have one chance. If I say, let me park first, and they don't listen, I roll my cart right back into the back. But not very far. Just inside so they can see the product still if they look through the window or as people walk in or out. Then when it's time to roll product, I calmly ask everyone to read and follow the signs. Then they start swarming me as I put items away. I politely remind them that during these times, I respectfully ask they maintain our social distancing guidelines. Then they started waiting at the section for the product they wanted most, but since they were there, I wouldn't dare dream of breaking my social distancing boundaries. So some stuff just didn't get put out, even though they'd see me walking to the area, item in hand, see them, turn around and put it back on my cart. If I can't put everything out in a timely manner, it goes back with me. If they really want it, they'll have another shot to act right when I come out again in 3 hours. Don't you hate how you're just trying to do a retail job and you have to basically babysit people? Or at least treat them like they're in the age range that you would be babysitting them at? Just try and be respectful, especially during a pandemic. Our next story is by kayemjayce. If you can't do the lab, you fail. The regrettable statement of my high school anatomy teacher. In 2015, I was in the second half of my senior year of high school. I had a Catholic education all of my life. In school, by the time we reach our upperclassmen years, we had the ability to choose 1 to 2 elective courses. Well, in that chapter of my life, I hope to pursue occupational therapy in college. 2 changes in my major and an F in psych later, I have my bachelor's in English and writing. Who would have freaking thought? So I graciously signed up for human anatomy. This class was taught by one of my Catholic school's nuns, who I did not get along with. I had taken biology, not by choice, with this woman who we'll call Sister Geraldine in the past. So, Sis Geraldine and I had some history from a previous year of academic torture together. You see, I think we would have gotten along in another plane of existence, maybe another dimension, but that's speculation. Not here, not on this planet, not in this timeline. She would sit her wide butt in her poor rolling desk chair and not move for a whole day. I swear, this woman was so large she had a gravitational pull. Sometimes I wondered if the pens and pencils she threw at students would get pulled into her orbit. And since Sister G was an old large goat, she taught science in the most religious way possible. Glancing over the reproductive system chapters, which were still covered in exams without being taught them, or referring to more private parts of the human anatomy with phrases such as Adam's gifts to Eve's fruitfulness. Her BS was constant and I was over it. If it wasn't for her cruel behavior and terrible treatment of her students, I wouldn't give a darn. Sister G was self-righteous. She felt that she could treat others with little to no respect because she chose a path of vocation. Every day I would battle her on this behavior because no one else ever dared to out of fear to get sent to the office, yelled at by her, or sent to sit outside her classroom. Students would pass by and they knew it was her room, where I was usually serving a penance outside, although to me it felt more like a blessing rather than a punishment. Not many people had the balls to call her out, but I did. I became the voice of my classroom. I freaking felt like Robin Hood that year. But I digress. The context is just as important as the story. Now you can see the picture clearer. Now you can understand the coal that fuels my hate fire. The story. Back to second semester 2015 like I started with, here we are at the beginning of the end. You see, in anatomy, most schools will have a lab for dissection to test your knowledge and learn by visuals or on-hand experience. Of course, I was expecting this, but I'm no steel-stomached Braveheart. And as my class walked and Sister Geraldine rolled into the lab across the hall, I could smell it. Formaldehyde. That smell could have pulled my lungs out through my nose and coughed up fumes, it was so strong. I visibly retched and went to step outside for a moment of air. But alas, Sister Planet rolled into my way and gave us the title of my rant. If you can't do the lab, you fail. And boy, did she have a sinister smile on her face. She wanted me gone and I could see it. Heck, I knew it. She was my Joker, my Lex Luthor for 2 years straight, but I wouldn't let her win. In the lab, I'm paired with a fellow classmate who we will call Brett. I asked Brett if he wouldn't mind picking out a pig to dissect. He complied and left to get one for us. I see people coming back to their spots at the long tables with little itty-bitty piggies, and I think that this may not be too bad. But boy, was I wrong. Brett managed to come back with the Baconator of pigs, an absolute unit of a porker who was twice the size of our dissection tray lay before me. I thought this could only get worse. But then, as if the fates heard my silent cries, an opportunity arose. So Sister Geraldine tried to occasionally make her students happy. She let us all name our pigs. We went around the room and said those names out loud. There were some silly ones like Chris P. Bacon or Miss Honey Ham, but when it came to me and Brett, I hold my hand in front of him in a silencing gesture. With a malicious smile slowly forming, I turned to my nemesis and in front of our class said this. This is Geraldine. I just want to know what kind of trouble they got in for calling the dissecting pig Geraldine after the teacher nun lady. That definitely takes some balls of steel. And our final story of the day is by TracyMinOB, No More Cookies. I was a 40-year-old single mom. I've always liked to bake, and a coworker gave me a recipe for the best cookies I've ever had. Double chocolate chip, 3 kinds of nuts, and a secret ingredient that makes the batter awesome. Thanks, Beck. We were accounting clerks in a union shop. We were not in the union, nor was any of the office staff. The shift workers were all guys, as were the mechanics. They were union. One weekend in mid-March, around 2015, I made Beck's cookies. I went a little overboard and made 8 to 10 dozen. I thought I'd be nice and took enough for everyone into work. I set them by the time clock at shift change so incoming and outgoing could both have a cookie. The guys loved them and ate them all. Beck and I got lots of compliments. A month later, my son asked me to make some, and I went overboard again. I again took enough cookies into work for everyone to have some. May rolls around, my son is doing prom, graduating, and we're busy around the house getting everything ready for the graduation party. I did not make cookies in May. Towards the end of May, my boss calls me into his office. One of the union guys have filed a grievance against me personally. I was shocked to say the least. The grievance stated that due to a pattern of past practices, I had neglected to make and give them cookies that month. Yes, you read that correctly. Because I had made and given them cookies 2 months in a row, one union guy was demanding that I continue to make cookies for them on my own time and at my own expense every month. My boss fought the grievance and won. I continued to bake and brought goodies into the office, but I was never permitted to share with any of the union guys again. I guess all it takes is one union guy to ruin it for all the union guys. I don't know if they were trying to be a wise guy or something, but it's pretty ridiculous to file a grievance because somebody didn't bring in cookies. But with that being said, that's all the time we have for today. So which of these stories was your favorite and why? Let me know in the comments down below. But besides that, if you enjoyed the video, please consider liking and subscribing and turn notifications on if you haven't so you'll never miss an upcoming video. Any little thing that you do helps the channel grow so much more. Whether it's commenting, subscribing, or just watching the video, thank you all so very much for supporting me right here on the Storytime channel. I hope you all have a wonderful day, and I'll see you all next time, right here.